Here are 4 key takeaways from the Warren Buffett annual letter to shareholders. The annual letter to shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway, written and delivered by Warren Buffett himself. And the letter, as you know, if you are familiar with it, it has become legendary. You can find annual letters dating back several decades on the old interwebs. And there's even entire blogs and books dedicated exclusively to Buffett's letters. And I really encourage you, if you've never read one, I encourage you to read one, if not all of his letters, because I think what you'll find is there is a ton of wisdom in these letters when it comes to investing and achieving financial freedom, delivered by arguably the greatest investor of all time. So I've got 4 takeaways for you today from the most recent letter. And the first is the most important and also happens to be the foundation of the wealth snowball. And that is, drumroll please, the power of compounding. Compounding returns, compounding interest, compounding dividends, compounding over time leads to incredible financial gain. Warren, in his letter, he gave several examples, but I like to focus, or I'm going to focus on one for you right now, and that is Coca-Cola. Warren said that him and his investors over there at the Berkshire Hathaway, they bought approximately $1.3 billion worth of Coca-Cola shares between 1989 and 1994. And at the time of that investment, with the number of shares that they had purchased, Coke was paying them $75 million a year in dividends. And because Warren is a patient investor, that $1.3 billion investment paying $75 million a year in dividends is now worth a whopping $25 billion and pays out over $700 million each year in dividends. That's a lot. That is a lot. That is a lot of dollar bills. Now, I know you and we have baby money compared to the gazillionaire Warren Buffett, but I think that we can both understand the power of this type of investment compounding over time. I mean, maybe we made a $13,000 investment, paying $750 a year in dividends that grew to a value of $260,000, paying us $7,000 a year in dividends. Now, imagine if we had 9 or 10 other similar investments that compounded over time. I mean, we'd be sitting pretty right now. We would, Bart. We'd be sitting pretty. And as they say, the best time to plant a tree, well, that was 20 years ago. The next best time, that's today. The same goes with and goes for investing and growing our money. We must make more of it, spend less of it, and invest for the long term with the power of compounding on our side. And it's because of this concept why I'm such an advocate of becoming and then living debt-free. And that is because we're on the wrong side of the compounding when we are the debtor, when we are the borrower. And we know what they say, the borrower is slave to the lender. And when we're in debt, we are on the wrong side of that compounding that we want to be working in our favor. The second interesting takeaway from the letter was Mr. Buffett saying that his investments in stocks and companies is similar to properly growing a flower garden. Get rid of the weeds and nurture the most beautiful flowers in that garden. And for Warren and Berkshire's portfolio, the point he was making in the letter was that you don't need an overly diverse portfolio with hundreds and hundreds of different stocks and companies. If you watch over your garden and nurture the most beautiful flowers, you can accomplish great wealth and financial security with just a handful of companies. Because almost all of Warren's portfolio is made up of Apple, Bank of America, Chevron, American Express, and Coca-Cola. And now, for the record, they do own, in Berkshire Hathaway, they own, I think it's around 50 different companies. But his position in all of those companies pales in size comparison to those most beautiful flowers like Apple and Bank of America and Chevron. In this concept, after reading that in the letter, it has me taking a closer look at my own portfolio and attempting to determine without bias how it has ended up to be the portfolio that it is today. And I say without bias, because with most things in our own life, we are biased, aren't we? Our political opinions, favorite sports teams, our children, we are biased. And with investing, what I need to learn is to be more unbiased in holding each position accountable for the most important factor for me, and that is return on capital. Where them dollar bills at? That's what I want each company to be able to answer. My biggest positions, they are Pfizer, Arbor Realty Trust, Verizon, Walgreens, Bank of America, Altria Group, Intel, etc. And that does remind me, I do need to come up with a video and a podcast episode detailing every single holding that I currently have in my portfolio, how it got there and what I'm thinking of it now. But if you consider the 7 holdings that I mentioned, you probably can determine how those positions ended up being at the top of the portfolio. And that is, drumroll please, that's dividends. Because, we love the dividends over here, don't we? But more specifically, it would be the dividend yield. And a popular mistake made by many investors when establishing a position in dividend stocks is to fall for the old dividend trap. You got me that time, didn't you? Yeah, you got me that time. Leaning more and more towards companies that pay the highest dividend yield without properly considering why that company pays such a high dividend in the first place. So just looking at 3 of those 7 holdings I mentioned, Pfizer, Walgreens, and Intel, nobody can mistake those for good investments recently, can they? The share value has decreased consistently for all 3 of them. So, and they've been trending down for over a year now. So, and I find them right now towards the top of my portfolio, with Pfizer being at the very top, because I was chasing dividend yield from brand name companies. So I know what Pfizer does. I know what Walgreens does. I've heard of Intel. So I thought, hey, high dividend and these great companies, but maybe over time and maybe soon, those aren't the best positions for me to be in trying to return my capital and grow it over time. So I'll take a closer look at that with you as well. I'll share that with you. And another interesting takeaway from the letter is that Warren said that out of the 500 companies that make up the S&P 500, 128 of them have revenue greater than $3 billion annually. And of those 128 companies, Berkshire is an investor in nearly 50 of them. And of those nearly 50, Berkshire is the largest single shareholder in 8 of them. And within his largest holdings, you will find several different sectors that are represented. Tech, energy, financials, consumer staples, consumer discretionary, entertainment, etc. So, and I might be putting words in Warren's mouth, but he basically said that investing in Berkshire Hathaway is like investing in a large cap blue chip mutual fund, but without management fees and with a way better track record. So pretty much what Warren said in the letter. I thought that was very interesting. Another great takeaway from the letter, which I've heard Warren mention this over and over again in past letters, television and interviews, etc. Warren makes it perfectly clear that he is a big fan of America, the American people, the creativity, the ingenuity, and most of all, capitalism. And I love to hear those things. I love to hear things like that because I feel probably the same way you do, which is exactly the way that Warren Buffett feels. Even, we live in an amazing country with wonderful people, and we don't praise this great nation enough because, we're living in a time when it seems to be in vogue to criticize and badmouth this nation. I mean, the news exploits the bad news, the crime, the violence, the fraud. We're made to believe how horrible things are in this country right now when the opposite is actually true. Times are great. This nation is great. Most all of the residents living in this country are wonderful, lovable, law-abiding citizens. We need to focus more on these facts and quiet the anti-American haters living here while simultaneously suckling the country's teat. Hey, get off of the teat, would you? If you don't like it here. And here's a direct quote from the letter from Warren that I really liked. I wanted to share with you. I've been investing for 80 years, more than 1/3 of our country's lifetime, And despite our citizens' penchant, almost enthusiasm for self-criticism and self-doubt, I have yet to see a time when it made sense to make a long-term bet against America, and I doubt very much that any reader of this letter will have a different experience in the future. You go, boy. You tell him, Uncle Warren. That's right. So that's what I have for you today. Hope you liked it. Compound interest. Treat your portfolio like a garden growing beautiful flowers. You don't need to own hundreds and hundreds of companies to feel diversified. And most importantly, always bet on America. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe to this podcast, leave a rating and a review. If you're watching this over on the YouTube channel, The Wealth Snowball, make sure you are indeed a subscriber of that. Click on the notification bell, like the video, and leave me a lovable comment. Until next time, have a great day, my friend.